Women are in fear, not being allowed to do what they want to do with their own bodies. People aren't being allowed to vote. The Taliban is in power. But I'm not talking about the Taliban. I'm talking about the other T. Good old Texas, where I reside. We're going to talk about the abortion ban. We're going to talk about the voting rights ban. We're going to get into, not Moderna. We're absolutely going to talk about the strong week that gold and silver had. And of course, we're going to get into uranium. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 133 of Bizarro World. Mr. Hodge, how in the hell are you?
Tejas, Gerardo, if you didn't know.
Freedom, but not for women and not for people that are poor.
Texas seems to get a lot of play on this podcast. This is going to be a good one. I can feel it. I'm doing fantastic, and hope everyone else is too, well rested after the Labor Day holiday and ready to get into it here in the fall.
Somebody referred to Governor Abbott earlier this week as hell on wheels.
You guys got all sorts of stuff going on down there.
Listen, before we get into all of that, because I think that's going to end up being a bit of a conversation, a bit of a lengthy conversation, we have to get into the performance that uranium and the spot price for physical uranium and Sprott's influence in it. And man, the juniors had themselves a week, right? And we've been, we've been preaching and asking people to get positioned. You wrote pieces, I've written pieces. Like we've both been on this for quite some time. And we've always said that when the uranium market turns to the upside, it's violent, right? It doesn't happen in baby steps. It tends to, jump over 3 steps at a time until it gets to the top. It's still early, but Lord, what a performance this week by some of these names, right? I look at Fission. Started the week.
Oh, Jesus, it's a fire.
Oh, Jesus, it's a fire. Started at 60 cents, closed near 80 at 78 cents. I could go down the list. Azarga, which, we've been telling everybody about the value there in Azarga, right? Ticker symbol, my favorite ticker symbol, AZZ. I am an AZZ man. 1 week performance from below 40 cents to 54 cents. That's a hell of a run. Spot price flirting with 38. And Sprott in there buying it all up. I'd love to hear your take, Nick. Obviously, I'm excited finally about the price action. And you know what? It's post-Labor Day here next week. Summer doldrums are behind us. Fall is here. That's typically when the price action really starts picking up. But the uranium sector isn't waiting.
The as is bouncing, as it were. We, like you say, you've recapped it. I've recapped it. We've been in the space for a long time. Let's recap it. What else do we got to do here for the next hour or so? The last run of uranium was back in 2006, 2007. The market's incredibly thin, incredibly opaque. And so back then, just one mine flooded and set the spot price of uranium to a record. Back then went up to $100 or around $140 a pound. And you saw the wave of equities go up significantly. And when I say significantly, some of the stocks went up like over 100,000% in the time period from 2003, 2004 to 2007, 2008, 9, 10, including International and Exco, Cameco, Denison, Paladin, right? And so, and then Energy Fuels, for example, which was then buying companies like Uraners and listing them on major stock exchanges. Like all that happened in the last uranium boom. Sorry, Gerardo, you kicked me off on a thing.
This is important. I think there's so much money to be made that the primer is important.
And then Fukushima happened. Everybody said nukes were bad. We said, no, they're not, but that didn't really matter. Japan shut them down. Germany shut them down. It was a psychological scar on the industry for a decade, basically. The equities lost 80 to 90% of their value. I think it's called the Global X Uranium ETF. I think that's what the sector fund is called. The ticker is URA. That was down like 90% from 2011 to 2017, 18, let's call it. And all the while people are saying, the price has to go up, the price of uranium has to go up, but nonetheless, it went to record lows somewhere down around $20 below, if not a couple of bucks below that at its ultimate lowest. And so the important points are that you can't mine uranium at that price. You need at least $50 for most projects across the world. We knew that uranium was going to be embraced as a clean energy technology. That took a lot longer than expected, but governments across the world are having their come to Jesus moment and realizing that they can't meet these climate goals without nuclear. And so it's getting backing now, both in the form of research. You saw big fusion announcements in the past week, even small modular reactor announcements, the extending of plant lives, and then nuclear plant lives. And then what you were talking about, of course, is you need a spark. So everyone's also saying the utilities are going to come back in because they have to, but they haven't for whatever reason. The contracts haven't expired yet. They can refine enough in the secondary markets. You can source it now from sands, sort of like you can source rare earths from sands and then refine them that way. And so anyway, here comes Sprott, and you know much more about that and have been writing about it more than I have. So it seems like the catalyst. I don't know if this is it or not, but I do know that if it's a false wave, it's the biggest false wave we've seen yet.
If it's a head fake, it's a heck of a one, right? I mean, the bottom line is the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust is designed to provide a transparent and liquid way of having direct exposure to the physical commodity without having to take a delivery of it, because as one would guess, taking physical delivery of uranium could probably be tricky for most people. Sprott doesn't have that problem. And so, they're in the market buying aggressively. They've pushed the price almost single-handedly near or just above the $38 a pound level after being stuck at 30, 31, and 32 for what seemed like infinity, right? The trust now has a total net asset value just shy of 860 million. As I mentioned, 22 million pounds, just shy of 22 million pounds of physical uranium. And look, this is just the start. I actually recommended the trust earlier this week, and it took off immediately. I actually don't think it made it to the buy up to price. I think it soared right past that. So that'll have to be adjusted unless there's a slight pullback. And a note, when you get 30, 40, 50% moves in a week, there's always going to be a slight pullback. We talked about the consolidation that lasted for a few months after that first initial run that we got earlier this year, and how we thought that was a perfect opportunity to double check that list, add to positions that you didn't feel you had enough exposure to, and maybe add some new positions like the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which again, I think is a phenomenal way to participate in a uranium bull market. All of that is proven correct. And again, heck of a week. Could there be a pause? It's human nature to take a little off the table if you're up, 100%, 200% in less than a month. I mean, Azarga Uranium, we talked about the fact that we didn't think it would last. It would make it out of this year, that it would last. It's a buyout target. I still think it gets bought out. That's going to have to happen at a higher price now. That became a position that was flat for me to a triple digit winner. I'm up 100% on that thing now in a matter of a couple of weeks. And so again, the moves in the space happen quickly. They're violent. I can't over explain or overemphasize just how brutal the bear market in the uranium space was post Fukushima. It took a lot of money from the sector. There was zero speculative capital. It's a testament to the better companies in the space that were able to bring in accretive assets and position themselves for the turn. And it's not a coincidence that those are the companies that are getting the big bids, the institutional bids, because of course the better companies are going to be tied in to those funds and those institutions, and even the smaller, family offices that, are dabbling with $5 or $10 million, but are looking for some exposure in the space. So And look, an exciting time to be a uranium bull. I joked that I'll be at the Beaver Creek Precious Metals Summit all next week, and that I was looking forward to all the uranium bulls congratulating themselves because it's not going to be a celebratory week. If you've been sitting on, Midas Gold / Perpetual Resources, with its world-class asset, and it's trading below what it was trading at in, 2010 or something like that on a share price level. But that brings me to gold. Look, I wrote a piece in April about uranium. I wrote another one, a couple of weeks ago. I talked to Brian London on his excellent podcast a couple of weeks ago about how excited I was about uranium. But I just also wrote about how I think gold is next, and we have to get into the price performance this week, Nick.
You're 1 second on gold. Wait, let's do the price action on uranium, which we didn't mention. So the only two things I want to wrap up on there is, yes, the pullback was, we talked about it and was played very well. I mean, I made a recommendation during that pullback that's already up 50%. And so that's only been a month and a half or 2 months or something. And so, yes, 100%. And two, the spot price is still only like $36, but it's been, air quotes, absolutely ripping. If there is such a thing for commodity prices, absolutely ripping. A move from $31 to $36 for uranium. If you've been watching uranium for the past few years, it just simply hasn't moved like that. And so just two things I wanted to add there.
No, important points. And look, while everybody's celebrating movement in the sector, significant movement, momentum, right? Everything all of a sudden is clear for the people that have been watching this space for quite a bit. I think gold's time is coming. I think that, let's get right into the jobs report, which was a slight miss this morning, Nick. What was the over under on it? And I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but if I remember correctly, I think the estimate was 750. And what did it come in at?
At like 225.
225 or 250. Here, let me get you the exact numbers just so we don't fib them. Analysts, the smartest among us, expected 720,000 new jobs to have been added. We added, go USA, 235,000. A slight miss, right? And obviously, the gold price reacted the way that it did, popping, almost 1%. Silver popped over 3%. Platinum followed, palladium followed, everything pretty much followed, right? And for the simple reason that this now gives Powell another reason to kind of not want to taper too quickly, which again, I had already called bullshit on that a little bit ago. I don't think if there is a taper, it's not going to be very significant. And a taper isn't a rate hike. And what the market is really afraid of, I think, isn't a taper. I think it's a rate hike, because I think that, the bond market can defend itself pretty nimbly and throw a tantrum that makes Powell make an about face. With the rate rise, they're going to have to eat that for at least a quarter or so. And I think this gives Powell cover to not have to raise rates for at least a couple of years, which he's already indicated was the path. But it also gives them cover to kind of say, look, this Delta variant is really it's really wreaking havoc on employment, and we want to make sure that we don't taper too quickly. It's an absolute farce. It's absolute bullshit that while home prices continue to rise, right? Home prices now, Nick, are up year on year here in Austin. I think it's pushing nearly 50%.
Wow. I think the average is 18%, something like that. Yeah. Wow.
Right. And meanwhile, the Fed wants to tell me, J&J, right? Jerome and Janet want to tell me that they are hell bent on making sure they address wealth inequality, and they have some creative solutions for it. And it's interesting to me when you don't see that you're the problem, right?
I don't even know what I want to say there. It's, I wrote my paid letter this week was titled, catching up from being ahead. I think, what else was going to happen? I mean, what was, growth was going to continue accelerating a pace off the bottom? No, I think we told you that was starting to slow. We've been writing about this rotation coming, perhaps the potential for slowing growth while things were continuing to inflate, and how that was a good environment for gold. And so that's exactly what's playing out. we said last week, or I said last week, I don't even think you needed to hear Powell speak to know or learn that. And it's obviously, partially bullshit, some of the things he says or how he frames them about, whatever, like you said, Delta weighing on the job recovery or whatever. We'll see now that these pandemic benefits and the rent stuff is starting to end here, if people get back to work. But I think the writing was on the wall for the slowing growth, right? The V has clearly leveled off, and we've been saying that was going to be a good environment for gold for fundamental reasons that you just ran down, and also for technical reasons that we highlighted, I think, last week on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, it's looking pretty darn good. And then I guess one more thing to add there is like the majors continue to deliver really good results. I mean, Barrick was back out today with whatever they're calling that thing, a share repurchase or capital return. Dividends are being raised, and the stocks are starting to bounce as well. Like I mentioned Kinross a couple of times, but even like Newmont convinced me to buy it this week. And so, that's going to hopefully have the trickle down effect. No one knows when that's going to happen, but it twofold, right? The trickle down effect in the equities, the big ones moving the small ones, but also a trickle down effect in, it's similar to uranium, right? We know they got to replenish these reserves, but when the fuck is it going to happen, right?
Right. And look, in the gold space, and I think this is an important point, not because I'm making it, but because it's factual. As you just mentioned, the majors and the mid-tiers are cashed up. And look, if I'm looking to discover 3 million ounces in Idaho, I might just go and buy me a Revival Gold at a very healthy premium. I may just go and buy me a Perpetua, right? Or what was a Midas Gold, and go get myself almost 7 million ounces with the probability for 14 and maybe even 20, as Nick and I believe. We've been to the property with these depressed prices, because it's a whole lot easier even to pay 100% premium right now than it is to go discover these things. Because exploration is expensive and it takes a while. And look, I don't think that we're going to have an opportunity in the gold space with the juniors like we have right now. And I was saying the exact same thing with uranium, still early days. But look, some of the moves have been really, really, really substantial. And for those of you that are out there and listen to this podcast, a month ago or 2 months ago or back in April when Nick and I were saying uranium's getting interesting, the fundamentals are clear, let's see what that catalyst is. And then we saw Sprott come in and we knew what would happen there, sustained buying in the spot in the spot market, driving the spot price up. Well, I think we're going to see a wave of M&A coming through with the majors buying out mid-tiers and even coming down to the exploration companies that have those robust assets. And the timing couldn't be better post Labor Day as we get into conference season and a pretty, seasonally strong time of the year for the gold price, right?
I mean, they're going to have to pay. You have Mark Bristow saying, we're not going to do these dumb deals. We're not going to do these dumb deals. But he hasn't been able to get a deal done, right? He was floating I think, was it like a Freeport thing or something earlier this year or last year? That's like too big of a mega merger. I mean, they're going to have to come for these quality mid-tier and junior assets. It's similar to uranium.
Absolutely. Nothing happens until it does. And then again, right. Everybody's smart again this week, right? After missing it for 5 or 6 years. A lot of people missed it for that long, but everybody's smart again. So let's see if we get smart about gold here soon. I think it's a hell of an opportunity. Yeah. I'll leave that there. Anything you're watching in the market specifically this week, Nick?
Let me think about it for 1 second. I think it continues to be tax loss season earlier. I've told you that already. I'm cleaning up. I'm trimming stuff that has been really high flyers, just light trimming. I continue to watch Cannabis. I give you that answer every time, and that market has continued to just be shit. Deals continue to get done. There was another $500 million acquisition announced this week in both companies. The buyer and the buyee went down on the news. One was Bruce Litton's company, who was the founder of Canopy Growth. And so the stocks, like all the stocks, just look the same. They continue in a consolidation pattern, and the fundamentals as far as the cash, the recreational cash that's here in the US, it continues to be robust and there's only a couple of names to pick from. And so I think I've been pecking away there. I was writing about that this week. And I think sitting on the couple of quality multi-state operators in the U.S. that also have to get acquired is a good way to make some money if you can sit on it for a bit.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is the part of the podcast where I managed to piss off the left and the right almost equally, probably. Are you ready, Mr. Hodge?
I'm always ready for it. I find myself on either side. And so even my friends, I piss off all the time because half the time I just take the other side to annoy them. So, yeah.
So this week, Texas, not the Taliban, the other T, Texas signed, well, it went into effect. It's been signed, but the new, what's being called the cardiac activity abortion ban went into effect Wednesday after the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to weigh in to prevent what is essentially 99.99% of abortions in the state. And why does it prevent 99.9% of abortions in the state? Because the law reads that once cardiac activity is detected in an embryo, which happens as early as 6 weeks, it is illegal from that point on to get an abortion in the state of Texas. Let me get to the pissing off of people. I am not someone that actually thinks having an abortion outside of cases of rape or incest or abuse is something that I am personally, as an individual, comfortable with. It's not something that I, in my personal moral compass, would do. My preference, right? Have a baby, didn't mean to have a baby. I'm having a baby. I'm going to have to figure it out. That is me. Let me piss the other side off. I simultaneously am dead set against a group of mostly white males getting together over some fucking scotch and deciding that they are going to tell women in the state of Texas what they can or cannot do with their body. We talk about America, and you know what? The Republican Party talks about how it's the party of rights and free speech and freedom and don't threat on me and all this other stuff that's said. And it's just cool memes and slogans, everybody. Government is gonna government. And in this case, Republicans are Republicaning, and be absolutely clear who this affects. Let me piss some more people off. I am not wealthy, but I am all right. I don't have generational wealth yet. I don't have a couple of $100 million that I could pass down, but there's an M or two in there, right? There's $1 million or $2 million there that can get me by the next couple of years. So let's say that I was the kind of guy that got a girl pregnant and the woman wanted to have an abortion. And I was with that. It's nothing for me to get a ticket, fly her out to another state, go have a nice little stay for a week somewhere. Maybe I'll even get her some tits while we're out there, go have the abortion and fly right back. And what I'm saying by telling you this, people, is if you have money, this law doesn't affect you. It doesn't say Texas residents can't have an abortion. It just says you can't have it here in the good old state of Texas. So what this does is it criminalizes abortions and only for the most vulnerable and less well-off amongst us. This will not affect the people that are passing the law on either side, the Democrats or the Republican side. They will continue to abortion away. They'll just do it in other states. And so they somehow, Nick, and excuse the rant because it's nowhere near over, they somehow were able to take like 3 of the things that I hate the most, right? I hate sex offenders. I hate fucking child rapists, people that incest. And so they managed to make sure that there wasn't an exception for a woman that's been raped or cases of incest. You got raped. You didn't know. You found out on week 6, day 1, where there is some cardiac activity. You don't have the money to go nowhere. You're having that baby. That's what you're doing. You're sitting the fuck down and you're having that baby. That's
crazy, man.
That's insane to me, right? And if that wasn't enough, Nick, they made it to where this isn't going to be criminally prosecutable. You'll love this part. They made it to where they have a hotline set up for citizens to snitch on each other. And then if it's proven that anybody got an abortion or aided and abetted an abortion, you as a private citizen resident in the state of Texas, the good old state of Texas, can actually sue anybody that aided or abetted in the furthering of an abortion, including the person that had it or discussed it, for a minimum of $10,000. I didn't think a law like this was possible in 2021. I got fucking anti-maskers and maskers alike at schools threatening to zip tie principals over wearing a mask, right? And this passes, and it's like, Halsey put a cool tweet up, and a couple of, celebrities used their platform to say, oh, this is unacceptable. And that's really all about it. I drove downtown with my wife this week. We had a nice dinner. I looked around. I thought the Capitol building was going to be stormed. I thought, nah, not much of a peep. Dinner was pleasant. Everybody was cool. It was a nice place. So again, I don't think those people are feeling the pressure. But man, did they manage to fucking wrap up a whole lot of the stuff that I like. I hate informants. I hate snitches. I'm all about accountability, which again is why I am not pro-abortion in a personal sense. But I sure in the hell am pro a woman doing whatever she wants to do with her body and so, dealing with the consequences of it. I will stop there because I could yell for another half hour about this.
Everything's bigger in Texas, including moral hypocrisy. And so here are my thoughts. I'm sort of with you. It's not my decision to make as a, libertarian leaning person. I want gay married couples to protect their pot plants with guns. Is that the saying? And that applies to
you made me laugh.
Abortion.
Thank you.
That applies to abortion as well. I'd also say that politicians are getting quite good at dividing people and hitting their hot buttons. That certainly applies here. I would have to think that the first case goes to the Supreme Court, which hasn't intervened yet, which is, I guess, something I could add to this conversation because, and I don't know a lot about this, but some people were expecting the Supreme Court to intervene before this law went into effect, but they did not, saying that because it was citizen enforced and not state enforced, that they weren't intervening. But, once you have a lawsuit, then it's, the lawsuit's in the state, right? And who's doing the investigating, and it's proceeding in a state court. And so I would have to assume that goes to the Supreme Court. And you said you couldn't imagine something like this happening in 2021, except, Gerardo, it's been crazy with the lockdowns and the masks. What wouldn't you expect? I don't know.
I should know better.
Subject entirely, but what they're doing in Australia with the lockdowns, right? And I know we've mentioned this a couple of times, but they're still on lockdown. Can't travel more than like something 5 kilometers from your home. But that's not even what I was going to mention. I saw something this week about a new law, or at least an enforcement of the lockdowns, where they're in some portion of Australia going to make you download an app and take a picture of yourself at your house and like geolocate it so they know that you're not like deviating from the lockdown mandate. Like, it's Orwellian shit. And I guess what's really scary is that citizens are willing to enforce it on each other. Like, that's the scary part for me, right?
Yes.
There's a reason I live out in the country with no neighbors, right? Like they're turning people on each other. And so in Texas, like you say, the citizens have to enforce it. And I have to assume that the thing behind this law is a moral reason, right? Typically that's the reason for pro-life arguments from conservative people. It's a religious thing or a moral thing, right? And so
separation of church and state. Anybody ever hear about that?
So they're preying on that, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so it's hypocritical because the people who adhere most ardently to that, and the ones who are gonna like actually take it upon themselves to enforce this are opposite from like the Falwells of the world who are jerking off in the corner to their wife getting banged out, right? Like their moral priorities are like they're being duped. So
and if she gets pregnant, they have enough money to just fly her out somewhere and maybe get her some new tits on the way there too.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so, yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. And so the moral compass, thing has been abducted, right? And so, yeah, anyway, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
On a happy note for citizens and freedom, at the same time that we're telling women what they can and can't do with their body if there's a baby in there, we Texans now have the right to carry a pistol in public. No license, no licensing, no training, baby. You don't even gotta know what a safety is. All good. You can carry it in public, and you. I remember living in New York in the 90s during the stop and frisk era, where Giuliani basically enabled his police goons to stop and frisk anybody that they didn't like. People of color, if it was someone of color that didn't like white people, if you don't like skaters, punk rock chicks, whoever it was, the cops basically had a green light to go and go mess with people and, stop and frisk. We got to get New York under control, right? And so this is the complete opposite of that. With this, you don't even have to go figure out how to use a gun. You can just go into the pawn shop, pass the background check, or go to a friend and not worry about a background check, get a gun, and go ride around and pop some shit off. So this is happening simultaneously with this abortion rights ban. Food for thought. Yeah, I just leave that there.
The freedoms, yeah, it's obviously misaligned. I'm weirdly for both things. I think you should be able to walk around with a gun and kill a fetus in your own body. I mean, it's anyway. That's how I come down on those things. And so, the open carry thing, we'll see how it plays out. But really, that's just a full embracement of the Second Amendment. Truly, if you walk around, and I've asked my brother-in-law, police officer, this. If they get calls for somebody walking around, and this is in Delaware, like with a sidearm out or something, it's typically like under open carry. The same reason you've seen these videos with people with rifles like outside the airport and stuff, right?
Absolutely. You know who can kill somebody and like after they're grown, Nick? Do you? I knew you would. You want to tell them? You want to tell them, hey guys, look. If you have a baby in you, woman, and you don't find out by week 6, too late. You cannot possibly take the life of the precious fetus, right? Under no conditions, right? Princess be damned. The only exception is a medical emergency. That is it. But in South Dakota, baby, if you're the attorney general, you could kill a pedestrian. You could have his glasses through your windshield. You could drive off. And don't worry, as long as you know the right people in America, you'll get off with a $500 fine for each misdemeanor. He will have to pay $1,000 and just a little probation. This despite the victim, the person that died, that was killed, the victim's family saying, what in the hell are you talking about? He not only hit my relative, he left my relative behind. Didn't report it. Left him in a ditch for 12 hours. Again, I am all about accountability, everybody. Accidents happen. The behavior of the Attorney General, Jason Ravensborg.
Pronounced Ravensborg.
Yep. Ravensborg. I was going to butcher the pronunciation. That behavior doesn't lend itself to someone that accidentally hit someone. I was in a car accident here just like a month ago. The same damn day I caught COVID. I told y'all my story. And the first thing I did was make sure that the young lady that hit us was okay. Sat her down, got her some water. Not because I'm like some sort of super nice guy or cool citizen guy. Just because it was the right thing to do. Again, I repeat, she hit me. So if I somehow manage to accidentally run into somebody and their glasses are poking through my windshield, I don't think, let me drive home and shut up till the next morning and figure out what my attorney wants me to do. Absolutely insane to me. But again, this is America in 2021. I don't know, Nick. I hate being an alarmist, but you are dead right, and I'm not using that word lightly. You are dead right in that government is finding more and more ways. It has to be intentional to pit the citizens against each other. And that's why I'm pleading with people out there, especially if you live in this country, don't fall for it. We have a whole lot more in common than we do differences. There's a whole lot more than we can agree on. We all want better lives for our families. We want upward mobility. We want to be responsible citizens. We want to contribute to our community. We want to be left the fuck alone by government. I think most of us can agree on all those things. You get into race and you get into education levels and income levels and all that. Really easy to separate people. You get into all the other things that the media throws at you and they're just monetizing your thoughts. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it because it's not going to end well if we continue down this path.
We talked about Mr. Ravnsborg on this podcast at least twice. I was throwing the red flags up on this, like the week the accident happened. I was like, no way. And you could see the writing on the wall where it was going to go because of where it was. And so I won't do a lot of recapping, but it ended up turning very nasty. Like Jason Ravnsborg defense team ended up getting some of the deceased guy's family to say on record that he told them he was suicidal years ago. And so they posited that he might have gone. It's a whole long story, Gerardo. I guess I'm just going to tell it.
Tell it.
Do you mind?
No, I want to. I know it. It's important because
it'll be good.
It's going to be a good it's a good segue into my NRA rant I'm about to get into. I told you I was going to get everybody mad today.
So the state's attorney general in South Dakota, Jason Ravnsborg, as we said, this is last year. He was driving a fairly long drive, hour, 2 hours. Things are far apart in the Midwest and flat, right? So he was lifelong Republican, had tried to run for several offices and failed, but he was certainly everyone in the Republican Party in South Dakota knew him, and he was an up and comer, and he went to all the events. And he was traveling from an event that night. I read the whole long article, so sorry, I'm going to tell you all the details. He was listening to a baseball game. Because this is all in the public record now. They had his cell phone files. He was messing with his cell phone, and then he put down his cell phone, and a minute later, he struck this individual. And his story is that he thought it was a deer. That's why he didn't look for it.
Deer with glasses.
Or the person. Right. Yeah, exactly. So he didn't even just drive home. He got a ride from the local sheriff who took him back to his house, the sheriff's house, lent him a car to complete his journey. And so the next morning they went back. And the reason the guy was out there, let me stop there for a second. Why was this guy on the road in South Dakota? He had either had an accident there previously and was going back to look for something is what they think. They don't know why he returned to the scene, but he had previously had an accident in that location, went back home earlier in the day, and then for some reason went back out at night to the location. They don't know why, but he had a flashlight, and they think maybe he was looking for something.
Jesus, is that you?
Oh, sorry. I had a technical glitch. And so they don't know why he was out there. But anyway, so the guy puts down his phone and he ends up striking him and obviously killing him, going back to his house. And who knows what happened from there. But what we know after that is that he was driving distracted at least 60 seconds before he struck this person. The person's face came through the windshield of his car because the person's glasses ended up on his front seat. And so all this taken together, you would have to assume that, and your account, Gerardo, of when you're in an accident, stopping and actually looking the fuck around to see what happened, right? He should have known that he hit a human being, and also being the responsible state's attorney that he is, right? Should have known that he hit a person and not a deer. And so the whole point, as I knew was going to happen when I started talking about this a year ago and followed up on it a couple of weeks ago as he was coming to the end of the trial, is that it's the good old boy system. I mean, it's the perfect example of it. I mean, I grew up with it in Maryland. It exists all over these great United States, right? You call your boy you went to college or high school with, right? And he's got your back because he's got your back. It's what it is. And so, and all the way up through it, it ended up causing a bit of political divides. Like even the governor said he should resign, but this guy didn't resign. He's going to stay in office and continue to wield power in the party, and more importantly, I don't care about the party, but he's in office as a state's attorney who has influence on things like you were just talking about when it comes to prosecutions and things. And so I don't want a gentleman like that making justice decisions for the populace.
One more fun fact, and then I'll let it go after this. They conveniently didn't take a toxicology test of this guy until 15 hours later. So again, right? He's given a ride. He's given another ride, a cruiser, so he can make it home. Nobody notices, the guy had glasses in the vehicle because it went through the vehicle because he hit him so hard. Come on. $1,000 in some community service and misdemeanors. All right.
And it's not even news because nobody cares about South Dakota. And
again,
9.9 people out of 10 you talk to have no idea this even happened. Yeah.
Again. And, and if you thought that was like, it in America for the week of news that just makes you want to pull your hair out. Did you hear about Remington Arms, the gun maker, and the lawyers?
I don't think I did.
So anyone that's familiar with Sandy Hook knows it was a horrific shooting back in 2012 where 20 children and 6 adults were killed by a guy. I won't say his name, but it was just a horrific tragedy. And so Remington filed for bankruptcy in 2018. And again, last year, despite that, it's still manufacturing AR-15s and all that. No big deal there. I'm, fan of assault rifles, fan of handguns, fan of defending yourself. But I am not a fan of being sued by the victims' families, the children's parents, in essence, and these defense attorneys for the gun maker responding by trying to subpoena the school records of these little, first and second and third graders. That's what they did this week. They asked for the attendance records and the report cards of these kids. Like, what are you going to do? Like, are you seriously this fucking tone deaf where you as a gun maker wants to put the kids on trial, the dead kids? Like, little Johnny wouldn't sit still, so he got lit up. Like, is that going to be the defense?
Yeah, I'm against all of it in principle. I don't think you can charge the gun company for the crime, and certainly the kids have nothing to do with it.
Literally have nothing to do with it. Yeah, no, look, it's been a week if you haven't noticed. Like, there's just so much going on that just seems so outlandish to me. And yet, like, it doesn't even really register too much. I mean, we talked about the abortion rights ban. I didn't even get into the voting rights ban because these assholes are so skilled at just piling, this, set of bills that's so restrictive to people's freedoms, individual liberties, the things that we, get mad at Kaepernick for taking a knee for, right? And nobody's really out there. So did you hear about the voting rights ban that went through simultaneously and into effect with the abortion ban?
I think we talked about it when it was before it went into effect, but go ahead.
We did. So no more drive-through voting. You can get the fuck out. You're disabled. You can't get out. You're older. You have arthritis, whatever. You can't drive-through vote anymore. It doesn't matter if you have the right credentials. Doesn't matter if you're registered. You have your registration card. It doesn't matter. You can't do drive-through voting. 24-hour voting, that's gone too, baby. You work the night shift and, or you work the day shift, can only go at night. Not happening. You work odd hours. Well, too bad. Figure it out. By the way, we don't have voting holidays here in America. So it's not like you get the paid day off to go, be a good citizen and do what you're supposed to do, which is vote, right? They're banning the distribution of mail-in ballot applications. So let's say you are somewhat disabled, or let's say you just have a tough time getting around, or, oh my God, you don't have transportation because you just can't afford it right now. Not only are your hours restricted now, not only can you not do the drive-through voting now anymore, but if somebody happens to think that sending unsolicited applications, legal applications, right, to request a mail-in ballot, and that person happens to be a local election official, Nick. So let's say I am the local election official, and I think this ban isn't just or fair for the citizenry, and I want my citizens to be able to vote by mailing their application and getting their ballot in, right? That all seems logical enough, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So if I am a local election official that believes that and acts on it and sends applications to my zip code to make sure everybody can vote, it's a felony. It's a felony, Nick, to send an application to request a mail-in ballot to somebody. This is insane if you're a third party. Political parties can do it. But do you think political parties are sending the other party applications or mail-in ballots? It is absolutely bonkers. I could go on. I mean, there's so much here. But again, this is 1 week in America, y'all.
Well, in Texas specifically, what I'm wondering is you're saying all this is it's one of the fastest growing states, if not the fastest growing state. And so how does that play into it? And what about all these woke companies who are there? You know, we've seen these companies weigh in on things like we were just talking about shootings, but also, you know, viruses and vaccines and other stuff. Do companies express their opinion about these new laws that are now in Texas? I mean, there's a lot of big companies in Texas now.
I will say this. There were several, Dell amongst them, that were very vocal when these laws were passed. Mind you, I'm speaking about laws that are now in effect. I am curious to see how active they are in addressing some of this and how accountable they hold, you know, whichever party they tend to affiliate with. I am not optimistic, although, you know, like you said, you know, these woke companies, which is just a generic term that we use for activist companies nowadays, right? Whatever side they're on. I'm not optimistic because I think at the end of the day, the money and the lobbyist will win out. And look, if I'm trying to get, let me connect dots here. If I'm Tesla, if I'm Elon Musk, if I am applying to be an electric provider for the state of Texas, and the state of Texas has an electrical grid problem already, and I think I can help alleviate that, am I going to call out Republican leadership that's doing everything in its power to tell women what to do with their bodies and make it really hard for everybody but the well-off or the people that can get around to vote? Or should I just kind of say, like he did this week, you know, I am all for individual liberties. I prefer less government, but I just don't really want to speak about politics right now. Right, exactly. We know what he'll do because that's what he did. That's what he said this week when he was asked about it. He tweeted this. And so that's why I'm not optimistic. And again, it's just for a state.
That's sort of what I was hinting, right? Yeah. Like the tax breaks and the things are too good, right? Don't bite the hand that feeds is sort of what I was hinting at there. Well, also interesting that Mr. Musk sees profitability in the old, what are they called, Gerardo? Virtual power plants or something.
I know a guy, Nick. Tell him Gerardo sent you.
That's funny.
Oh. Growth is slowing, Nick. Who could have seen this coming?
We sort of already talked about that. But I guess I'll piggyback on that and knock out a couple of topics that I had put on there is, you know, these companies are going harder and harder and deeper to get further into your pockets and get you hooked on the credit cycle. And I'll give you just a couple of examples, right? Like we talk about really bad things. Like we all know that like payday loans are really bad, right? And how predatory that is. But, you know, when there's no more super low class, they got to go up the food chain to get that fixed. I'm talking about essentially banks and companies who seek fees as their main profit center, right? And so just two quick call outs I wanted to mention because we all know about Robinhood and how they've facilitated the retail investor, and we all know about the rise of the retail investor. We all know about that, and how, meme stocks and free trading, no commissions, and everyone's on the hoodie. We've been talking about the hoodies for a year now, right, Gerardo?
Yeah.
But the thing about the hoodie is that, like, they're selling all your data to the people with real money, and so they can front run your trades. And they're conditioning you in a gamification-like style to part ways with your money, like you're in Las Vegas, by encouraging you to take either more risky bets or to leverage up. I hope you understand what I'm saying. They're trying to get you to go on leverage or to trade options, et cetera. And it doesn't end up well for some people so far. It remains to be seen, but that's not enough crack for them now. They need more. Robinhood, I'm talking about. We saw how the stock hasn't done too well after doing well after IPO, pulling back. And this is just an example. I don't really have a point here other than to say they're milking the lower and middle classes. They're going to start letting you get your paycheck a day early if you deposit it right into Robinhood. They're working with like the paycheck providers to do that with no fees. And so I thought that was very interesting. I just saw that this week. And then there's another company, another big trend right now for people who live hand to mouth is renting to own, right? We know you can Airbnb and you can rent stuff in the sharing economy, but renting to own is coming back. This is like fancy layaway essentially, but now you do it with an app, of course.
Fancy.
Right. But what's happening is these people are using an app, specifically one called Klarna, Klarna, to lease to own things and on credit, obviously. And the app is what is it engineered to do? To sell them and to get them to buy more things on credit, right? And so people who are using this app are ending up buying all this shit on credit now. And I forget who it was has filed a complaint and they're getting investigated. And so this is just sort of like the milking is what I wanted to highlight, and how they're doing that for growth. It's not really increases in productivity or true gains, but financial engineering and shifting around, and more importantly, the bleeding out of the biggest portion of this country, the middle and lower class, right?
Y'all are getting it from every side, and I'm just telling everybody, find more common ground, because there's people talk about the Great Reset and all these conspiracies, and I don't happen to believe that government, for the most part, is smart enough to pull most of the stuff off that they get credited for, right? This one I actually believe is very, very intentional. And I think, we talk about fourth turnings a lot on this podcast. I think this is all pointing to, the next bang in that cycle, the thing that really allows for a restructuring of a lot of our institutions, the way that lobbyists are allowed to go, from public to private, and, in almost unabated fashion, and the way that politicians are allowed to trade stocks despite being on committees that they are voting for or against and getting classified briefings months before the rest of the public, and then being allowed to go ahead and buy stock that common sense would tell you may prove profitable, and then failing to disclose that for 9 months, illegally. And then it just kind of goes away. It's just buried. So while all this is happening, the lower class and the middle class is being hollowed out, and it's being hollowed out intentionally for control purposes, like everything else. We talked about, I'm not a fan of talking about other countries where I'm not intimately familiar, and I'm not Australia or New Zealand. But again, me being anti-mandate and pro, responsibility and choice, I don't believe that you should be locking, places down. I believe people should have a choice. That's just my personal belief. But it's not just exclusive to America. I happen to live here. And man, every week it just seems like it's easier and easier for me to find the stuff that outrages me. I used to have to look for this stuff once upon a time, Nick. Now it just kind of just literally pops up. Like, what?
I think that's intentional as well. Part of, it's like, they serve it up to you.
Absolutely. And what America is most mad about this week is Joe Rogan getting COVID and deciding to treat it for himself however the fuck he felt like it. That was the passionate issue of the week. After the litany of things that I just went over, voting rights ban, telling women what to do with their body, making it, all the things that kids getting sued, dead kids being sued for their report cards and attendance records so they can be, tried in a trial. After all of that, the thing that really had the Twitter sphere and like the news outlets and all that in a frenzy was Joe Rogan caught COVID and was okay 3 days later. And he took some non-traditional stuff and some vitamins because you know what? It's his damn right as a human being. If he wants to take horse dewormer and paste and an IV drip and vitamins and it works for him, we should be asking him what dose he took. How much did you take? Had you taken it before? Did you have any side effects? No, instead of having an intelligent conversation, it becomes politicized where the left goes crazy for one reason, the right goes crazy for another, and somehow people on Twitter thinks this is really what's going to prove that the right is right about something and that the left is wrong about something and vice versa. And it's just like a big show at this point. But the show, the way it's going, does not have a happy ending, everyone. So, stay aware. I was going to say stay woke, but I didn't want to make anyone upset.
I've never listened to a Joe Rogan podcast, but thank you, Joe, for making it possible for us to do this podcast.
I actually love Joe Rogan. I've been to 3 of his comedy shows live. They were great. When I have the time to actually listen to his podcast, it's entertaining, and it's informative. Do I have to agree or care what he thinks? No, a podcast is meant to entertain. It's meant to inform, hopefully, and, help you kill some time. He does a phenomenal job of that and is compensated very, very well for it. Why anybody else thinks that what Joe Rogan does with his body or his COVID is consequential to how Gerardo treats his COVID or what he does to prevent COVID in the future is fucking batshit crazy. It's crazy. And to make that a political issue at a time where all these restrictions are being placed on the citizenry on both sides, mind you, on both sides is a little disheartening, man.
Take note, Tejas. We want our ivermectin and our abortions.
Freedom! Hell on Wheels had himself a good week. He passed some oppressive shit. Apparently he gets a kick out of doing that. I still agree with Governor Abbott that we shouldn't have a mask mandate. I think people should have a choice, but a lot of what happened this week in Texas was not the thing for me. Mr. Hodge, that's all I have right now. Do you have anything else before I get on another 30-minute rant?
No, let's pinch it off there, and we'll come back to it next week. There's some things we didn't get to, but it'll make for a good podcast down the road. So, no, I'm content to cut it off.
Agreed. We're coming up to an hour. If you made it this far, congratulations. I'd send you a magic star or a unicorn if I could, but I can't. So I just want to say thank you. I did have a couple of CEOs this week who quietly, privately told me this is their Monday morning workout routine background. And so, to that, I say thank you and cheers. They also asked that I keep it confidential because they don't want their board of directors to get them in trouble. So I won't say their names. And shout out to Paul, man, who always reaches out and provides some good feedback and commentary through LinkedIn. It's been a hell of a week and I shouldn't be surprised. And as Paul would say, no shit, Sherlock. Of course they're trying to make it to where Texas has voting rights oppressed because they don't like the demographic, Nick. And that's what it is, right? They don't like the people that are coming here that could change the way the state governs. And so, yeah, that is what it is. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 133 of Bizarro World. Let's see what uranium does next week. It closed at $39 a pound today, Nick. Send us off.
Oh, uranium is spiking. See ya.